displaying the glory of God's creation by visiting every state park, national park, and national forest in the contiguous 48 states. Welcome to Parking Full Time with Big Dave the Parker. First hole, 290 feet, par 3. That was the parking lot I showed you at the beginning there. I want to welcome you back to Parking Full Time. I am Big Dave the Parker. We are at Grand Central Station Disc Golf Course. We are a few miles east of Clemson, South Carolina. Technically, we are in the city of Central, South Carolina. There are some cedar trees off to the right. Those can really gobble up your disc if you throw it over there. Overall, this is a pretty straightforward and open first hole. There is the view back to the tee from behind the basket. Second hole is 360 feet, par 3. This course has two distinct lines of play. Each are 18 holes. They have one line called the freight line, another line called the locomotive line. I'll tell you more about them in a few minutes. This course walkabout follows the freight line. This hole is a little bit narrower than the previous hole. That is the park entrance road right there. This is the only hole where you have to worry about cars and watch for cars before you throw. There's the second basket. Nice hole. This hole is also a slight dogleg right. There's the view back to the tee from behind the second basket. Third hole, 270 feet, par 3. This hole plays out this tight chute of trees to start, but then the hole opens up pretty good. It's also a slight dogleg right and plays more downhill than uphill. It's downhill at first, and then there's a little bit of uphill when you get up here close to the basket. I filmed this walkabout, by the way, on Thursday, February the 16th. And the temperature here was 62 degrees, and as you can see, it was mostly cloudy. There's the view back to the tee from behind the third basket. Fourth hole is 440 feet. It is a par 3. It starts by following this low voltage power line that you see overhead here. It's downhill at first, but then it curves to the right and climbs steeply to get to the basket. This is a long hole, but it's also a pretty open hole, so you can really rear back and drive one here. I mentioned the freight line and the locomotive line before. This course is organized into two 18-hole routes called the freight line and the locomotive line. There are 27 distinct tee pads and 25 distinct baskets, and so some holes on the two lines share tee pads or baskets, and some holes are just copies. They're played on both lines. I'll say a little more about that in a minute, but here is the fourth basket. It sits on a steep upslope, which makes putting more interesting, and there's the view back to the tee. Fifth hole is 315 feet. It's a par 3. It plays slightly downhill. It starts out in this rather open area here, but as you can probably guess, we are headed into the narrow chute cut into the trees that's directly ahead. This hole is a slight dogleg left. Those trees are dense enough that you're not likely to lose a disc in there, but if you throw it into the trees, it could be a really tough and really tight recovery shot to get back out here into the fairway. There's the fifth basket. It's a nice hole. I like this hole. There's the view back to the tee from behind the basket. Sixth hole is 740 feet. It is a par 4, and it does play directly down this high voltage power line corridor that you see here. There's a mando under the towers, under the piers of the tower for the locomotive line, but not for the freight line. So for the freight line, you could throw your disc to the right of the tower, like I just walked right there. One word about the course route here. So the 6th tee is actually very close to the 5th tee. When you exit the 5th basket area, you walk up a trail that's cut through the woods that takes you uphill to the left and up to the 6th tee. A couple other words about the two lines, the freight line and the locomotive line. This course is very well signed. There are signs on every tee for both the freight line and for the locomotive line for those respective tees. In general, the black and the yellow correspond to the freight line, and the blue corresponds to the locomotive line. In general, the freight line holes are a little bit shorter and a little more straightforward than the locomotive line holes. I had no trouble following the course route for either line. Personally, I probably like the freight line a little bit better than I like the locomotive line. I think some of the holes on the locomotive line are a little bit contrived. But I'm not a very good disc golf player. If I was a more skilled disc golfer, I might like the locomotive line better. There's the basket for the 6th hole on the freight line. Notice it's underneath one of the towers here, so you have to pick your angle carefully and get around the supports. 7th hole is 500 feet. It's a par 4. It continues the downhill glide along the power line corridor from the previous hole. There's out of bounds tight to the left, but there's plenty of room to the right. Now, when I did this walkabout, they were doing some construction. It looked like they were upgrading either the wastewater runoff or the sewer here, and so you see the black markings there from the construction. And so I had to pause the video while I stepped over the tarp there. There's also a creek that sits 100 feet or so in front of the basket. The creek is also out of bounds. And so we're going to have another break in the video here because I can't fly over the creek like a disc could. And now we're up to the basket area. This is a pretty open hole, but a really nice hole. Very scenic hole with the creek. 8th hole is 455 feet. It is a par 4. It plays back over the creek, kind of the opposite direction as the 7th hole. And this is my favorite hole on this course because you have to decide whether or not you're going to try to get across the creek on your first throw, or whether you're going to lay up and try to get across the creek on your second throw. So there's some nice strategy involved there. I like this hole. Again, I can't fly over the creek like a disc could, so there's going to be a pause in the video here while I walked around to the other side of the creek. Once you get across the creek, then the hole plays steeply uphill and plays into this little narrow chute of trees with the basket perched here on the steep hillside. Again, there's a lot of strategy in this hole, a very different kind of hole. Probably my favorite hole on this course. There's the basket and the view back to the tee. 9th hole, and of course the final hole on the front 9. It's 280 feet, slightly uphill, par 3. This big mound of dirt here is from the construction project that I mentioned earlier. Also, there's some debris, some logs and such, that's been laid out here from the construction project. Normally those things aren't here, but they're kind of in the way and they actually make for kind of interesting obstacles. Normally this is a very open hole, and since this is the last hole on the front 9, I will thank you for watching. Parking full-time would not be anything without the people who watch. I realize that every day, and I thank you every day. There's the view from behind the basket on the 9th hole. I will see you on the back 9.